Fifth Avenue in New York City has long been known as one of the most prestigious and affluent streets in the world. Lined with luxurious mansions and opulent buildings, it has been home to some of the wealthiest families in history. From the Gilded Age of the late 19th century to the present day, the architecture and lifestyles of Fifth Avenue residents have evolved and changed dramatically. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Fifth Avenue was home to some of the most extravagant and ostentatious mansions in the city. The Vanderbilts, Astors, and Clarks were just a few of the wealthy families who called Fifth Avenue home during that time. But what stands now in the place of the historic grandeur? Maybe you have been shopping nearby, or were taking a sip of coffee on the corner of former Vanderbilt's Showstopper. We bet you have instantly thought of the Cartier Building with an amazing pearl backstory. Today, we will take you on an amazing journey to the Fifth Avenue locations that feature elaborate facades, ornate interiors, and sprawling gardens. You will see the most iconic Vanderbilt mansions: the Petit House, Mrs. Astor's house, Clark's Folly, and all the houses that now form our favorite Cartier building. The history of Fifth Avenue and Millionaire mansions dates back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when a wave of wealthy industrialists and bankers built grand estates along this prestigious avenue. But we bet you'd probably never guess that it began with a rather ordinary name: Middle Road. Similar to the 1811 Commissioner's Plan for Manhattan, which rationally outlined the city's future growth, Middle Road was a component of a previous city council real estate plan. Middle Road, as its name implies, was located in the center of a sizable piece of property that the council had sold in 1785 to generate local revenue for the newly formed country. At first, it was the sole road leading to this undeveloped area of Manhattan. However, two other roads were subsequently constructed, eventually becoming Park Avenue and Sixth Avenue. The mansions in Washington Square Park, where Fifth Avenue actually starts, are the starting point for the gradual northward march of luxury homes and the corresponding retail business. Who was the first? The Aster family was the driving force behind Fifth Avenue's change. William Backhouse Aster Sr. was able to give his son and Caroline Aster a piece of land on 34th Street and Fifth Avenue as a wedding present in 1854, since patriarch John Jacob Astor had acquired substantial portions of Manhattan in the previously described land deals. But since old money didn't have to show off, the final house was a pretty simple brownstone. However, Caroline was compelled to take action when Alexander Stewart and other businessmen moved across the street. The original Mrs. Astor's house emerged after substantial interior modifications in the French Rococo style. In the midst of the renowned 400 ballroom, social status was also gained and lost. Why 400? The ballroom that could easily fit the mentioned quantity of guests was filled with floor-to-ceiling artworks and a massive chandelier, and was built in a new wing that replaced the stables. After selling the property, the widowed Mrs. Astor and her son relocated to a magnificent French Renaissance double residence at 840 and 841 Fifth Avenue, located at 65th Street. The new estate was Mrs. Astor's last home in New York City, designed by Richard Hunt. When the new mansion was ready to move in, her brownstone on 34th Street was torn down, and her son Jack built a hotel bordering that of his cousin on the property and called it the Astoria, later known as the Waldorf-Astoria. In February of 1896, Mrs. Astor became officially a resident on Upper Fifth Avenue across from the park. The house was a double mansion, and a main ballroom with a capacity of 1,200, 4 times the capacity of her ballroom on 34th Street. She died there in 1908, and her newest grandeur was demolished in 1926. The family gave up the mansion after John Jacob Astor, who had inherited his mother's share, perished on board the RMS Titanic shortly after. The temple Emanu-El now stands where the site was sold to developers. The temple is truly among the biggest of all Jewish denominations and the largest Reformed temple in the world. But who was next to make a socialite statement? The Vanderbilt Triple Palace, 640 and 660 Fifth Avenue. These 3 townhouses, built in 1882, were given to the daughters of William Henry Vanderbilt and his son, Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt. Immediately, the so-called homes were named Triple Palaces. The entire block on Fifth Avenue between 51st and 52nd Street, as well as the corner of 52nd Street, was occupied by magnificent structures. American entrepreneur and Carnegie Steel Company chairman Henry Clay Frick was so impressed by the building of 640 Fifth Avenue that he declared, "The only thing I will ever want is to drive past the Triple Palaces." While George Vanderbilt was busy constructing the Biltmore estate in North Carolina, Frick did in fact aim to emulate Vanderbilt's art collection and even moved into 640 Fifth Avenue in 1905 under a 10-year lease. If George had not been prohibited from selling the house and artwork to anybody outside the family by William H. Vanderbilt's bequest, he would have purchased the house. Later, using a legal loophole, Vanderbilt's grandson was able to sell the property and artwork to the Astors, who then sold the holdings in the 1940s. Ironically, the buildings were removed and replaced with skyscrapers because they were deemed archaic. Retailers H&M, Godiva, and Juicy Couture now call them home. But Frick's mansion and art collection, including the hidden basement bowling alley on 70th Street and 5th Avenue, remain untouched. Morgan Freeman Plant Mansion, 645 5th Avenue. In 1905, architect Gilbert built this amazing American Renaissance mansion at the corner of 52nd Street and 5th Avenue for Morgan Freeman Plant, son of the railroad tycoon. But now the building serves as the flagship store of Cartier in New York City. The plant house was designed with facades on both 52nd Street and 5th Avenue. Both have an attic concealed under a frieze, and the house's facade on 52nd Street features an elaborate pavilion. The entire building's levels are occupied by the Cartier store. After the Roman Catholic Asylum left the area in the early 1900s, a hotel was planned for the southeast corner of 5th Avenue and 52nd Street. The southern part of the property was developed as the Marble Twins, while the northern part became the Morton F. Plant House when the Vanderbilts prevented the hotel's construction. But how did Plant give up his mansion for Pierre Cartier? There is a real story behind it. When Plant and his wife Maisie considered buying a new mansion, the price was too harsh to maintain 2 houses. Yet, at that time, Maisie fell in love with 2 Cartier's pearl necklaces, a double strand of enormous natural South Sea pearls worth up to $1 million. Pierre Cartier sensed an opportunity and offered to trade the double strand necklace and an additional $100 for the Plant's New York City home. It was an unusual deal, but definitely a win-win. Plant moved uptown to a more opulent home on the city's new Millionaire's Mile after unloading his original mansion by exchanging it for a necklace his wife wanted from Cartier. Now the Cartier Building, the main New York City store of jeweler Cartier, consists of the Morton F. Plant House at 651 to 653 Fifth Avenue and the Edward Holbrook House at 4 East 52nd Street. The Holbrook House was designed by Charles Gilbert for Edward Holbrook, who was president of the Gorham Manufacturing Company in the 1900s. This five-story home features a neoclassical style. There are 3 bays in the limestone facade. The center bay is wider than the other 2 bays, and the lowest 2 stories have plate glass windows. Above the first-story center bay, there is a clock and a projecting marquee. Light fixtures are located in the outside bays. When Cartier moved into the Edward Holbrook House in the 1920s, the original entrance was taken down. William K. Vanderbilt Mansion, 660 Fifth Avenue. The William Kissam Vanderbilt House, also referred to as the Petit Chateau, was a chateau-style residence located at 660 Fifth Avenue near the starting point of Millionaire's Row. Alva, Vanderbilt's wife, collaborated with Richard Morris Hunt, the mansion's architect, to design the house of her dreams in the French Renaissance. Through no means, the Petit Chateau was indeed a petit one. In reality, it was a magnificent, castle-like building with a glittering white limestone facade that contrasted sharply with the classic brownstone houses of New York. The mansion was adorned with furnishings imported from European palaces, and the interiors matched the exterior. No expense was spared. The housewarming was as distinctive as the mansion. In March 1883, Alva hosted a fancy dress ball at the estate that drew thousands of guests. The New York press completely fell in love with the event, which was just as amazing as advertised. Her impeccable taste was evident in her attire, which the magazine dubbed Mrs. W.K. Vanderbilt's Great Fancy Dress Ball. The New York World even went so far as to claim that it was an occasion that had never been matched in the city's social history. This social triumph, which cost her $250,000, cemented the Vanderbilt family's place in New York society. After being sold to a real estate developer, the mansion was demolished in 1926 and replaced with an office skyscraper at 666 Fifth Avenue. In addition to retail companies like Hollister Co. and Uniqlo, the building now houses offices for numerous legal firms, including Schiff Harden. The William A. Clark Mansion, 960 Fifth Avenue. The William Andrews Clark residence at 960 Fifth Avenue, located at the more northern end of Millionaire's Row, was dubbed Clark's Folly. Born in Pennsylvania, Clark eventually found his way to financial success in the Montana gold rush of the early 1860s after moving west with his family to pursue a legal education. However, it was copper that really made Clark rich and earned him a reputation as one of Butte, Montana's 3 copper kings. But there was one more fact in his life that resembled his name: his Fifth Avenue mansion. It was built for an incredible $6 million at the time, or over $150 million today. The mansion had a swimming pool, a hidden garage, 4 art galleries, 121 rooms, 31 bathrooms, and an underground rail connection to supply coal for heating. Although the home was built in 1911, the Copper King lived there for just 14 years before passing away. One of the shortest-lived structures in New York City, the mansion was demolished as soon as it was sold in 1927 for less than $3 million, or roughly half of its original cost. Eventually, the mansion was replaced by a 12-story luxury condo building designed by Rosario Candela. The Cornelius Vanderbilt II Mansion, 742 to 748 Fifth Avenue, built in 1883 for Cornelius Vanderbilt II, the eldest grandson of Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt. The mansion was a spacious residence located at 1 West 57th Street in the center of Millionaire's Row. At the time, it was said that Cornelius Vanderbilt II's residence was the biggest single-family home in New York City. Yet, He hired George Post to construct the new estate because the family thought others were attempting to surpass this home. Later, in the 1890s, they hired Richard Morris Hunt, Alva's favorite architect, to assist Post in enlarging the estate. The neighborhood had altered by the 1920s. This formerly residential area has been appropriated by hotels and business establishments. Soon, the Cartier Building and the Plaza Hotel encircle the Vanderbilt estate, making it seem like an odd remnant from another era. Large commercial development projects nearby triggered the wife of Cornelius, Alice, to sell the house in 1926. After it was demolished, a realty corporation in its place built the Bergdorf Goodman department store, which still stands there today. The entire block is occupied by the department store, which had a significant renovation in 2002. The mansion's relics can also be seen all throughout Manhattan, such as the magnificent fireplace that is currently housed in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the front gates that are now in Central Park, and sculpture reliefs that are now in the Sherry Netherland Hotel. As we have reached the end of our mixture of historic mansions and the new buildings towering on Fifth Avenue, we wonder if you liked this type of story. Have you ever visited any of these places, like the current Cartier Building and the Petit House? Do you want us to create more videos about historical mansions and places of interest? Drop us a line about your ideas. We want to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching.